I've been working on this action combat Gladiator Roguelite for the Playdate, and last week I added a spin attack that you activate by using the crank, 4 new enemies, as well as a wave spawning system. Currently, there's not any roguelite elements, and I mentioned previously that I planned on having a randomly generated map like how Slay the Spire does it. So, this week I'll be implementing a much simpler version of that. However, first I wanted to address something a couple comments suggested in my last video, which was a way to make it so changing the direction you crank changes the direction you spin. It was a simple fix, so I added in that little detail. Now, for the map, I put together 3 different map icons. The skull is just for regular enemy rooms, the skull and crossbones for more difficult elite rooms, and lastly, an icon for the shop. I might add some more room types later, but I'll see how this feels once I get it fully implemented. I started off by just trying to display them in the game. I created a simple map layout where it's only one path, but you can occasionally decide between 2 rooms to add some strategy and variety. Eventually, I'll have it randomly generate the room path and options, but for now, I'm just testing with this path. Next, I added some path dividers between the different rooms and made it so you can use the crank to explore the whole path. I had an idea of how I wanted the map to animate to make it seem like you're traveling to the next room, so I added that in really quickly. To highlight which room you're currently selecting, I just made the selected room bob up and down. You can use the D-pad to switch between different options. The background looked a bit plain, so I took an old paper texture, dithered it, and added a border to the map to make it look more cohesive. I also made it so when you press A, you load into the selected level. I have a way to define which enemies spawn in, so you'll notice in this level there's only rats and worms spawning. I'll use this when I implement the random map generation to create some variety between the rooms. My next task was to allow you to beat a room and move on to the next one. I just made it so if you beat the second or third wave, it counts as beating the room, and it'll kick you back to the map. But I had to squash this bug with the enemies spawning in the map first. You can see it's working now, so you have a nice sense of progression of beating rooms and moving on to the next one. I'm not quite sure how I feel about the wave system. I'm thinking I might change it to something like how in the All-Star mode for Melee, it shows you these icons of enemies you have left to defeat. Let me know if you have any suggestions in the comments. Eventually, once you defeat the last room in the map, you'll move on to a new area. And maybe the last room in each map will be some sort of boss room. I'm planning on having 3 areas on release with different enemies for each area. The shop level didn't do anything yet, so I started implementing the shop scene. I didn't have much time this week, so I only had time to implement one small section of the shop. I got a bunch of awesome suggestions for items and abilities to make for the shop last week, which I was hoping to implement sometime for this week, but I think it's gonna have to wait until next time. While playing through, I found the scroll animation was kind of jarring, so I changed it to animate from the last level to the new one. But if you're on the first level, it'll show you the entire map. Next week, I'll be finishing up the shop and hopefully adding some of the suggested abilities and items to purchase at the shop. If you missed last week's video, you can click the video on the left. If you're watching in the future, the next devlog is on the right.